Once again, welcome to the Power of Perception. My name is Tanya Gilbert, and we'll go ahead and get started in the material today on the intricacies and the importance of the mind-body connection. Like I said before, feel free to ask questions via the chat box, and I will be able to answer them through talking through the answers with you. So the first thing we're going to discuss is our conception of reality. So this is a huge deal because it relates to everything that you're experiencing throughout the day. Everything is affected by the kind of universe that you live in. And Albert Einstein actually said one of the most important things is for you to decide what type of universe do you live in. Do you live in a hostile universe or do you live in a peaceful universe? So that's kind of what this slide is articulating. So the quote here says, "We do not describe the world we see the world we can describe." So the photo at the top of the screen has two people that are arguing a little bit about what they're seeing. So if I was to ask you, webinar audience, what do you think is the right answer here? Are they looking at a 9 or are they looking at a 6? What do you think? Anybody have a thought? It's a puzzle. It's a trick question. Yes, it is. It's exactly it. It's both. So reality is subjective. It's whatever we choose to look at. It's the angle that we're looking at. It's the silver lining, so to speak, that we choose to look at. All of those things are of the utmost importance. So why does this happen? So our senses are constantly taking in information, and that is what determines our reality, what we're hearing, what we're seeing, what we're smelling, everything that we're touching. So the human mind, though, can only process about 1/billionth of the stimuli that you are subjected to in your environment every day. I mean, imagine that you're driving down the interstate and you're hopefully looking directly in front of you. But does that mean there's not stuff going on all around you? No, it just means that you're fixated on the road in front of you because that's what you should do when you're driving. So therefore, reality is based on where we're focusing. What you put your attention on is going to be magnified, as I always say, as I used to say as a health coach. So if we want to change our reality, we have to change our perception. We have to change what we're focusing on. So there's several things that you can do, but what they found is that when you choose to do this deliberately, when you choose to select what you want to be in your reality, quote, every day, this actually changes the brain. It changes how the brain is wired, which is one of the explanations for depression, one of the explanations for stress and anxiety. And it's also been used to help people recover from brain trauma, such as a stroke. They've used something called neuroplasticity. So we're going to talk a little bit about at the end of the presentation what self-directed neuroplasticity is and how you can actually use this in your daily life. It doesn't have to be something fancy that's done through a treatment center or anything like that. So one thing to be cognizant of when we're talking about the perception of our, the power of our perception is identifying what the lens of the mind is. So everything that you've experienced, your personal relationships, where you went to school, who was in your life, all of your experiences and conditioning are filtering your reality. So this explains what your personal lens is of your mind. So if you take a look at the picture here at the bottom, you're looking at an object in the reality. If you're starting on the left with all these photos, you take it in through your senses and it's filtered through your own personal, I don't want to say distortion, but our own personal filter changes what we're seeing, and that's when it affects the brain. So one thing that might be stressful to me may be even relaxing to the next person. For example, being stuck in traffic. The majority of people would probably find that to be extremely stressful, but there are people that I know who will just put on a nice classical music soundtrack or get caught up on their audiobook. They use that time to relax, and they've trained themselves to not be stressed in certain situations. So changing your filter or your lens is extremely powerful, and it's something that you have complete control over. This is something that once you're identified or aware of it, you can change this. So the world exists in the mind, essentially. You believe what you perceive to be true, but you have to take into consideration that everything that you're perceiving is going through your own lens. So it's important to question our realities, to say, okay, are you 100% sure that this is really how it is? And stay open-minded. The other thing that's coming through in the last few hundred years of scientific research is that what we pull in through our senses is actually debatable. So if I was to tap my computer here, it feels like a solid object, right? And if you look at the photo at the bottom, solid object looks solid. I mean, to me, the computer, the table, everything looks solid. Your cell phone, your phone that you're calling in on today. But if, as we've discovered through scientific research, matter is actually made up of tiny vibrating particles and atoms. It's not solid. So the human body, again, you look at your body and you think you're a fixed structure, but the human body is actually the same thing. It's full of constantly moving cells, energy systems, vibrating particles and atoms. It's not a solid structure. Your physiology right now has changed from what it was this morning. So your body's always changing, and it's not a frozen unit. So that's one thing we have to take into consideration as we move into different treatments for health and for staying well. That are we treating the body as a frozen structure, or are we treating it as an energy system? So this insight into the true nature of both our world and our minds and our bodies has helped us achieve new levels of health, and that's one of the powers of the things that you'll learn today, and why it's so powerfully effective to help you. One thing to be aware of is that as you're sitting here, you're taking in information, right? But within less than 1/100th of a second, what you see, hear, taste, touch, or smell is constantly changing your body's chemistry and producing something called neuropeptides in the brains and in the cells of your body. So neuropeptides are just large groups of neurotransmitters. You've heard of the term neurotransmitters, which are going to be your serotonin, your dopamine, acetylcholine, etc. These are the things that control your mood, your energy level. So these are large groups of neurotransmitters, essentially. So another thing to be aware of is that what you look at throughout the day has a huge effect on your body's chemistry. And what they've done studies on this. People that are looking at natural settings, like having an office with a window. Sorry if you don't have one. You still have the ability to go outside throughout the day periodically. Hopefully you're not locked in somewhere. But a natural setting produces a much more positive chemical response than sitting in an industrial setting. Distinctly different brain waves were found in research in different chemistry in the brain produced just from what you're looking at. And you can only imagine what you're hearing and what you're tasting or smelling. I mean, if you've ever been through the perfume aisle or the cologne aisle at the department store and you smell something wonderful, I know my mood will be uplifted if I smell something like that. Or if you're baking cookies, that's always I know we're talking about health and wellness. I shouldn't bring up sugar, but that's something that's always pleasant. And then hearing beautiful music or hearing a train go by, that's usually unpleasant unless you're really into trains. Hearing the crashing sound of construction. They're doing construction outside of where I'm at right now, so it's just kind of loud and disruptive. So your chemistry is constantly changing based on what you're pulling in from your environment. So that's something very important to note as we go into the next slide. And not only does it change your mood, but it changes your heart rate, your blood pressure, and what kinds of stress hormones that your body's producing. So if I was to ask you right now, what is stress? If I was to ask you, can you bring me a bucket of stress? Probably can't do that because stress is all subjective. It's a perception. Like I said earlier, what might be stressful to you isn't necessarily stressful to the next person. So when you take a moment and identify something and choose to see it a little differently, your body will produce different hormones in response to that. And I always say, I will talk about one of the concepts that's used for this shift. It's called reframing. We'll talk about that here at the end. The next slide is just a little exercise I'd like to do. So this is an example to show you how powerful your sensory input is. So I'm assuming most people have experienced the sirens in their rearview mirror. It's an unfortunate thing, whether it be for running a stop sign or hopefully nothing too extravagant like stealing your car or something like that. But we've all probably had a police officer pull us over for one reason or another. So what happens when you see the sirens in the rearview mirror? What happens to your body when this happens, if you've experienced this? Nervous, yes. Blood pressure goes up. Absolutely. Oops. Yes, you get irritated. You get so it's both a mental and it's both a physiological. Your body is responding as well. Your heart rate goes up, you're stressed, you feel your blood pressure rise. So absolutely. So this is just an extreme example of what's going on as we're taking in new information. So very good. So I just wanted to show you how powerful it is that what we're taking into our senses, how that affects our body's chemistry. So this is where it gets interesting. So we're able to shift our perception every day, and learning to do this and acclimating this as a habit is so incredibly powerful. So you've heard of the term silver lining when it's used to emphasize maybe the hopeful side of a situation that might seem unfortunate on the surface. So the common word is, the common expression is every cloud is a silver lining. It means that the worst events or situations ultimately could have some type of positive impact. The positive impact may be more long-term rather than the short-term, but what are you focusing on? So this is a very important thing to do. It's an important aspect. I also do a presentation on resiliency, that this is the core of it. What are you focusing on? And asking yourself this question can shift your entire point of view. So just like this photograph here at the bottom, if you're looking on the left, it looks rather unfortunate. If you look on the right, it looks rather beautiful, unless you're, again, that's subjective too, isn't it? You may like the desert more than greenery, but hopefully you get the point. Any questions so far about the sensory inputs and various things we've talked about? Okay. Perfect. Okay, so this is where I'm going to talk about some new stuff. So bear with me, because then it gets to the fun section, okay? So let's talk a little bit about how powerful the molecules of thought we have are. So every feeling, notion, or emotion that you have produces very specific brain chemicals. So if you're afraid of the dark, for example, and you go into a dark room, you're like, just like when you see the sirens, you're feeling anxiety, you're feeling stress, you're interpreting that as a threat. So thinking is translated into very precise what are called neuropeptides, like I mentioned before. But what they found, and this is absolutely amazing, is that instead of just the brain cells communicating back and forth with these neuropeptides, they're finding that the receptors for these neuropeptides are on all over the body. It's especially been found in the stomach lining, in the immune system, the digestive tract. So when you have a thought of fear, it's not just going into your brain, it's actually being transmitted to every cell in your body. We have a thinking body. How we think is affecting our body, essentially. So it's really amazing how this has been found. So emotions are therefore constantly affecting both your brain and your physical body all the time. So the more you're tuned into this, the more you can work with your own intuition to improve your health and to identify various things in your environment and in your circumstances that maybe you can change. I always use the example of what kind of stuff do you follow, like on social media? Are you following positive things, or are you reading about all the horrible stuff going on in the world and the negativity, conflict? Are you one of the people that fights on social media? That's not healthy either. But there are things on social media that you can, if you're on social media, which is becoming so popular today, are you following things that are positive? Are you looking at positive quotes throughout the day? Are you following Aziel Health? Because as my business, the last slide I'll show you, I have several social media accounts that you're welcome to follow. I try to post very uplifting, interesting factoids about the mind-body connection to support this theory that you should be following positive things on social media, because that's where a lot of people's attention is today. And again, what kind of conversations are you having in your life? What do you read? What types of books are you indulging in? What kind of shows are you watching? Are they positive? I know a lot of people today are watching the Game of Thrones. I actually tuned into this recently and was really surprised at how much violence there is in that show. Now, I can't say it's a bad show or anything like that, but if you're going to watch something like Game of Thrones, just make sure to balance it out with some positivity, some lighthearted stuff perhaps to help offset the fact that you're being exposed to that kind of violence. Does that make sense? Because whether you like it or not, it is being absorbed by your brain and in turn your physical body. Very good. So this is a slide to reiterate how the cells are communicating. So I wanted to kind of simplify it. So if you look at the picture here at the bottom on the left, you have two people talking. You have one person that's talking. For example, I'm talking right now through the webinar, and we have people listening who are the receptors. So you have a transmitter and you have a receptor. That's just simplified communication. So what's happening with the brain cells is that the brain cells are transmitting thoughts, transmitting an interpretation, and sending that interpretation to the cells of your body. So your immune system, your stomach, digestive cells, for example, are receiving the neuropeptides produced by the perception of your environment. So that is why this is so important. So if you're perceiving yourself as being stressed out all the time, you're going to, in turn, have a stressed out body. There is a really good TED Talk that was just recently, I can't remember who it's by, but it's on how stress, they found that people that interpret stress as harmful are more likely to have to die and to have disease, whereas if you interpret stress as a challenge, you're more likely to have a higher level of health. So this is really just reiterating what that says. It's just your biology is affected by your perception. So now we're going to get into the mind-body connection, and I'm going to talk to you through some really interesting studies that have been done that are really cool about how powerful this is, and ways that you can incorporate this both into your work site and into your own life. So the mind-body connection, again, the body is not a frozen structure. It's made of atoms and molecules vibrating at various speeds and frequencies. So your body is made of energy. So it's actually giving off energy all the time, too. Have you ever been around someone in a bad mood and you can almost feel them in a bad mood? Or perhaps you had a really positive experience with someone and you just left there feeling all kinds of good. I had a really positive experience in a store yesterday with the cashier, and I just was in a better mood when I got to my car, and I thought that was really awesome. And it's because you're picking up other people's energy all the time. In fact, they found that there's like, it's probably about 2 feet off from your body. You're giving off like a circular energy all around you all the time. So the people that are especially close to you, both in proximity and I suppose in intimate relationships, your family, etc., you're absorbing each other's energy. So I always say it's important that not only to give off positive energy because it's affecting other people, but encouraging those around us to stay in positive places as well because it's affecting us too. So as we increase the awareness that the mind and the body are an inseparable unit, this is a whole another multitude of things that are affecting our health that we can do to improve our health. One of those is neuroplasticity, or where we're directing our thoughts every day and how that affects our brain. Any questions about the mind-body connection? All right, so let's get into some of these interesting studies. First one is about perception. So who's seen this movie? Sounds like somebody's got a case of the Mondays. So it's very interesting what they found about Mondays. More people in our civilization, especially the United States, die on Monday morning, or die on Monday, not just Monday, but on Monday morning at 9 a.m. than any other time of the week. And this is obviously a characteristic only of the human species. But what's the difference between Monday and Tuesday to your dog or your cat? Because they're not aware of that conditioning. They don't have that, what would that be? What does Monday mean to us that causes these effects on our health? Work, yes. Beginning of a lot of work, a 5-day stretch of work, correct. Perhaps it's you're conditioned to be feeling overwhelmed, to be feeling stressed. There's a lot of things that may go into that I find that very, very interesting. Business, stress schedule, yes, absolutely. It means negative. It means negative, something negative, evidently, obviously. Long drive, yeah, long drive, long days ahead. So how we interpret our reality affects our minds and correspondingly affects our bodies and overall health. So as a work site, as Tanya, what could you do potentially at work to make Mondays more enjoyable? I always ask that as I do this presentation. Is there something that you can do personally or as with your colleagues that could make Monday something to look forward to? Anybody have any ideas? I always say treat yourself. Maybe you have a new outfit planned, or for me it's always maybe jewelry. Bring in flowers. Oh, that's great. For other people and for yourself, yes. Sleep in. Well, we don't want to affect our jobs negatively. That would cause us own stress. Reward yourself. Treat yourself. Yes. Very good. Monday yoga. That could be great. Thanks, Megan. Great. That's a good way to promote this. So there's all kinds of things that you could do. You could treat yourself to a cappuccino that morning. Maybe have something to look forward to. Bring in food for a coworker. Bring in something for a team. Something healthy. Have that be, find a way to recondition the stressful things in your life, and you will notice monumental changes to how you experience your world, to how you experience your reality. I think Monday is a great example. If you are on social media, you may see a lot of people posting memes and things on Mondays about how awful it is, but I would ask to challenge you to find a way to make your Mondays better for you and for your colleagues. Maybe you guys can talk to Megan about that more after the webinar. Very good. So the next thing I want to talk about when it comes to the power of the mind and the mind-body connection is something called premature cognitive commitment. So this is really interesting. The example I'm going to use here is how they train baby elephants. So when training an elephant, when it's a baby, they begin by tying it up with an iron chain to a big tree. Over time, they gradually reduce the size of the chain and ultimately end up replacing it with just a little rope. So if you've ever been to the circus or seen movies on the circus, you'll see often the elephant, instead of being tied up with a bunch of chains, because an elephant is a very powerful animal, it would take a lot to retain an elephant to a specific area if it wanted to leave. But oftentimes they're just tied up with a tiny little rope. And it's because they've made a commitment, a premature cognitive commitment in their mind that they're imprisoned. They can't leave. They're tied up, and they don't challenge that. So what they found in psychology is that people do this too. People that have been raised a certain way, maybe had an initial experience with for example, if you've ever heard about the 4-minute mile and how that was broken, 1959, or prior to 1959, scientists said there's no way a human being can run a 4-minute mile. So in 1959, Robert Bannister ran a 4-minute mile. Within 30 days, I think it was like a dozen people also ran a 4-minute mile. And it's because they broke through their premature cognitive commitments. They said, okay, let's challenge that and see what else is possible. So it's good to spend time self-reflecting on some of the things that you believe you may not be capable of, and maybe examining that differently. Changing your perception can have a huge effect on your life. And hopefully the elephants will, I can't say if I want them to figure this out or not, but as if you're not a fan of the circus and how they treat the animals, but they're smart enough, you'd think they'd figured it out, but they have to sit there and contemplate and challenge that theory that they've been raised on. So it's not an easy thing to do, but it's very simple. Another example of premature cognitive commitments is linked to initial sensory experiences. So another example of a study that was done that shows how this works to kind of give you an ability to see something in your mind that may be a blind spot as of right now. But what they found is when they separate fish in a fish tank with a glass partition, after, a series of months or weeks, they remove the partition, you'll find that the fish won't try to continue to swim past where the partition was, even if they can. They go as far as it is, and then they turn around because they've already tried to get through the glass a couple times, and they're like, well, might as well just give up and I'm stuck here. Their senses edit out that possibility, so they don't try to swim in past the partition anymore. So you have to ask yourself if perhaps that you've limited something in your mind as to what it is you're capable of based on a past experience, and maybe challenge that, question that. I would say, is that 100%? Are you 100% sure that's true? For example, I had several patients that were like, "Oh, I'd never run a half marathon when I was running the mini," and I'm like, "Are you 100% sure that you're not capable of that?" Like, you have to question these things that we say are true often. Right. Another example, this is really interesting as well, how our brains may be changed. This is, again, a form of neuroplasticity, but they did a study where kittens were raised without exposure to horizontal lines and in just rooms with vertical lines. And what they found was when they put the kittens into a regular environment, they were bumping into furniture because their senses would edit out what they didn't think existed. And bring in only what they thought existed, what their brain had been trained to see. So that is really fascinating to me because you have to ask yourself, what am I editing out? What am I potentially not seeing? And I always say that's one of the main benefits of working with a third party, whether that be a health coach or some kind of role model. Somebody, Megan is rather brilliant. I mean, she could help you with a lot of stuff, but I think that it is so powerful to have someone in your life that can help you see things that maybe you literally can't. Like, so in this experiment, they literally were editing out. It wasn't even a choice. It was the way their brain was wired. So just a great example here of how that works. All right. This is one of my favorite studies to talk about. So just to give you an example of the power of the mind-body connection, there is a concept I wanted to bring up called entrainment. Entrainment represents a phenomenon in physics, actually, that talks about the synchronization of various things in the universe to conserve energy. So the whole point is to conserve energy. Less energy is expended when we are in sync with something in our environment. So two objects of like vibration that are closer in proximity, meaning in real life, the object of the lesser energy will begin to vibrate to match that of the stronger energy vibration. So that is why maybe you're drawn to certain people in your life. Maybe you like to go to certain places. Everything is made of energy, and that energy is affecting your body. So what they did in this study is actually founded in the 1600s. Christian Huygens did a study with pendulum clocks. What he did is he put a bunch of pendulum clocks in a room, and they were all swinging at different speeds, different velocities back and forth. So some were fast, some were slow. But when he came back to the room later that day, all the pendulums had synchronized in their environment. That is pretty amazing. So it almost seems kind of hocus pocus, but it's just because we're made of energy, the world is made of energy, and things are synchronizing. And to help you conceptualize this a little further, I have some examples of entrainment that I wanted to talk about as various examples. This is really amazing. When you hold a child, or maybe when you're cuddling with someone, when your heart rates will synchronize. They won't be the same rate, but they will form a rhythmic relationship. So they did a study where adults were holding babies doing what's called the kangaroo hold, where you hold the baby against your skin. And they found that there was a rhythmic relationship between the child and the adult. And the breathing rates also synchronized. So people that you're have intimate relationships with, you will have that. The other thing that happens in nature is two fireflies, when they sit and land on the same branch, they'll begin to flash their lights in unison. You may have seen this before. That's another example of entrainment. They're entraining in each other's energy. Women who live together, and females may have experienced this, but their menstrual cycles will synchronize at the same time. And that is another form of entraining in your environment. Your body not only is giving off energy, but it's also giving off pheromones. So it's something that will affect other people in your environment. And again, our health isn't just our health. Our health is affecting everybody that we come into contact with on some, maybe even if it's a micro level. It is affecting other people because of that, the fact that we are entraining and giving off energy. You also can feel when you're having an argument with someone. You ever heard the expression that there was tension in the air? That's a literal thing. When you fight with someone, you become out of sync with them. As the opposite of when you agree with someone, when you're having a really good conversation, you're entraining with that person, and your energy and your breathing will actually start to match theirs. So the body's always changing. The body's physiology, again, is always changing, just to reiterate that, and it's trying to synchronize its rhythms with the rhythms of the environment to conserve energy. Any questions about the concepts of either premature commitments or entrainment that you have right now? Hopefully you guys are learning something new today. All right. So just to continue on, a little bit more about the power of our bodies and our energy systems, there was a study that was done on something called kinesthetic tactile stimulation. So a study was done at the University of Miami on premature babies, and what they found is that the babies were stroked or touched for, there was a term they used in research, stroked for 10 minutes a day for 3 times a day. The purpose of the experiment was a cost savings experiment. Well, what they found was the babies gained an average of 49% more weight per day than the control group. So there was something non-material that was influencing the level of growth hormone in the bodies of the premature babies. So what might be another name for kinesthetic tactile stimulation? What do you think was going on here? Hugs. Very similar. Who doesn't love a good hug? Snuggling, yes. But what do you think what kind of effect was that having on the baby? Bonding, yes, exactly. There was affection. There was, God forbid, in research they call it love, but they were giving affection, bonding, snuggling to these little babies, and they got healthier. I mean, the studies show that married people live longer than single. There is something going on with our energy of our bodies and how we heal and how healthy we are based on the amount of love or affection and bonding that we have. I mean, if you were to take a look at the human species as an animalistic culture, and you think about animals in the wild, like animals that are like in groups and supporting each other, they're probably going to live a little longer. They're probably going to be healthier mentally and physically. So, pretty brilliant study to exemplify this. Very good. Thank you for the example. So the next slide, this is actually my favorite experiment, maybe because I like bunnies, but who knows. But there was a mind-body connection experiment done at the Ohio State University on the metabolism of cholesterol in rabbits. So what they did in this study, and I do not advocate experimenting on animals, just so we're clear. These are just examples of research. But one group, they gave rabbits a diet extremely high in cholesterol, and they found that just one group of rabbits didn't get the high cholesterol despite being fed the exact same diet. So what they found was, after exploring all of this confusing result, is the technician's behavior was the only thing that was the only variable that they could find. Instead of just throwing food in their cages, the technician would take the bunnies out of their cages and he'd pet them and he'd sing to them and cuddle them, kind of like we would do to our pets, for example. So the affection that this man had for the bunnies resulted in a change in their emotional state, their temperament, their stress level, and in result, their bodies shunted the cholesterol into a different metabolic pathway so they didn't get the high cholesterol and the hardening of the arteries, which is essentially heart disease. And if you know anything about heart disease kills more people in this country than anything else. So that's why I wanted to bring up this study, because it's incredibly powerful to show what is our world lacking, I'm not going to be out with a peace flag and say everybody needs to love each other, but perhaps this is something to think about. I'm not suggesting that we go up and hug and sing and kiss our colleagues. That's an HR nightmare. Don't worry, I'm not suggesting that. But I am suggesting that we try to be more, perhaps more caring and forgiving and loving in our environments, because clearly this is affecting not only, just our general health, but our heart health. I mean, the heart literally is being affected by the amount of love in our lives, and that's an extremely important factor. That's just a good example. All right, so now we're going to get into the final section of the webinar that talks about how you can change your brain and explaining a little bit about neuroplasticity. So neuroplasticity means that the brain is constantly rewiring and changing itself throughout our lifetime. They didn't think this was the case. They used to think that once you became an adult, your brain stopped growing, but that is absolutely not true. Your brain is constantly changing. So I always use this as an example of a term called mental fitness, that you can do things to specifically strengthen your brain and make yourself more resilient. And there are specific things that you can do to do that. But it has to be with things such as intention, focusing and repeating things that we're doing every day. So the things that we'll talk about today are attention, awareness, and how these things can change your beliefs and how your beliefs ultimately are rewiring your brain. So in regards to the mental fitness aspect, it's the same as going to the gym. Neuroplasticity is not an overnight change to your brain. It's going to be incremental. It's going to be less dramatic than just snapping your fingers. So same with going to the gym. Unfortunately, if you start running and lifting weights, you're not going to look like a supermodel or bodybuilder overnight. It's going to take time. It's going to take persistence. So I always ask people, if you're wanting to understand neuroplasticity, think of it as mental fitness, but how often do you work out your body? If I was to ask you how many times you go to the gym every week or exercise, most people say a couple every day, so there you go, or a couple times a week is the least I hear. Typically you do some kind of walking, some type of cardio, but how often are you working out your mind? What are you doing in terms of your intentional cleaning up and focusing of your thoughts and of of questioning your beliefs, questioning your limitations, having reflective time, I think is extremely important. And because your thoughts are controlling everything, not only your body's chemistry, but your behavior. Everything you do begins with what you're thinking about. So mental fitness, to me, is where it all should begin. It's the epitome of where your body goes. So I used to tell people that I was coaching who wanted to be more fit is what's the kind of stuff that you focus on? Are you reading fitness magazines? Are you following social media fitness blogs? Are you reading books on fat loss and muscle development? And where's your brain going every day? Because that's where your body's going to turn out from. So here are a few things that neuroplasticity can do for the brain. It can help you create a positive attitude. It can help you overcome negativity, increase your mental sharpness, clarity, your level of happiness, your brain's acuity, and help you stay mentally stronger longer in your life. It really is working out your brain. It's proving the fitness of your brain. And the word mental health, I think, is tainted. It's stigmatized. I'm not really talking about mental health. We're talking about mental fitness and brain health, essentially. So there are 3 things you can do that I would like to teach you today, and then we'll wrap up here. 3 simple things you can do to perform self-directed neuroplasticity in your daily life. And that is involving your conscious mind to basically choose your thoughts or choose new patterns of thinking about your world. And again, it happens slowly, but with repetition and time, these methods create actual new neural pathways in the brain. So the analogy I use here is if you were to go through a big cornfield and just kind of wade through it once to get to the other side, would there be a path made? There may be evidence that you were there, but there's really not going to be a whole lot of damage done to make a path. But if you were to keep going back and forth over that cornfield, back and forth over time, you're going to create a walkway. You're going to create a path, a neural path in this example of new way of thinking. So use that to help motivate you to stay consistent. The quote I have here is by Andrew Wheels in a book called Spontaneous Healing. He says, among other things, neuroplasticity means that emotions such as happiness and compassion can be cultivated in much the same way that a person can learn through repetition to play golf. Because any type of practice changes the physical aspects of specific brain areas. Very cool, right? So the first of the 3 we'll talk about is awareness. As Deepak Chopra says, you can only change what you're first able to see. No enemy is more insidious than the one you are blind to. So increasing our awareness will allow us to take control over our health. When we become aware of the power of our minds, that's the first step that allows us to change them, which hopefully today, through this material, you've become more aware of the power of perception, of the power of your mind. Becoming aware that we have future cognitive commitments that we ultimately could is the first step to changing them. And this shift in mindset will allow you to create new neural pathways in your brain. When you start to increase your awareness, that opens up supposedly the Pandora's box of possibility for you. The next aspect of neuroplasticity is our attention. We've kind of already talked about this, but every single day you make a choice about what you want to focus on, because our focus determines our reality. So placing our attention on something new creates new neural pathways in the brain. And like I said before, when you repeatedly focus your attention, your brain will create these new circuits. If you take a look at the picture in the upper right-hand corner of the screen, you've got two people on, it looks like a bus, and one person is looking out the window and enjoying the view and having a good time. The other person is sulking and staring in the corner against the black rocks and looks rather unhappy. So again, you do have a choice about what you want to focus on. But what I ask people when I show this slide is, what happens when one of these, or let's say both of these people have experienced something tragic? They have a death in the family. They have to go through a divorce. They have a loss of a loved one. They have lost a job. They have a car breaks down. You stub your toe even, something simple. Who's going to handle it better? You know, who's going to take that and say, okay, I'll be all right? You probably would guess the person on the right, because they have, the happier person, right? So I always say that this is the time, that the days that you don't have a lot of catastrophe going on are the days we should practice this, because then when things happen, we're able to be more resilient and bounce back better. And they don't have to be catastrophes. They can be things that we grow from, things that we learn from. We're able to use that shifting of our perception to find the silver lining and grow from our experiences versus being bogged down by them. So one thing to note, how often and how much you repeat and focus your attention on something is going to be basically your key to success. So another one of my favorite, I'm a quote person, obviously, but Carlos Castaneda says that happiness is an attitude. We either make ourselves miserable or we make ourselves happy and strong, but the amount of work is the same. So ask yourself, well, how much work you're putting into your attitude. And sometimes they say some people that are angry, they say if you're angry for more than 10 minutes, you're enjoying it on some level. So maybe ask yourself that, be open-minded and be able to question your thought patterns and maybe select new ones, healthier ones. So here's just a quick little exercise I wanted to show you about the power of our attention. If you'll start with the photo on the left, tell me what you see in this picture. Or two people? Yeah. I saw two people. So if you're looking if you see the two people, you're typically focusing on the black. So I would ask you now, try to put your attention on the white in the photo. When you do this, yeah, somebody says chess pieces. Yeah, then I see chess pieces pop out, or table legs, or whatever you might want to say those are. But if you shift from back and forth, and don't make yourself dizzy here, but if you shift back and forth between the dark and the light, you will see two entirely different scenarios. So let's try the picture on the right. It's a little bit more complicated. What do you see when you look at the photo on the right? Absolutely. Either you may see two people enjoying music. Looks like they're wearing sombreros, and the other thing you may see if you look at the larger item of the picture, two older people. Yeah, so it could be two different things, and neither of them are bad, but there is always an alternative way to look at something. And I would encourage you, yeah, I see the vase in the middle now too. It actually could be more than two. It could be a multitude of different photos here. But I think it's important to use this example as the reminder of shifting our perception. There is always another way to look at a situation. And maybe challenging at first, but if you take a step back, refocus your attention, you can find different things. There's always a silver lining. Very good. Thank you for the responses and the examples there. All right. So the next concept that we will review here is something called reframing, and this is the last of the three concepts to help you build neuroplasticity. This is my favorite, actually, because it's something you can use so easily, incorporate this into your work and into your lifestyle. Reframing means you actively rethink a situation, and you're using language to do that. So the words that you attach to things are very powerful. For example, if you think of something as a problem, it's a problem, but what if it's a challenge? And then it has a totally different connotation in terms of how it makes you feel. And remember, your thoughts are turning into your behavior. So by reframing our thoughts to be positive, we'll therefore hopefully take more positive action and increase the areas of the brain that generate positive feelings. So this actually changes your brain. Conversely, people that engage in negative thinking and negative reframing, this has the ability to grow negative feelings in the brain and causing a downward spiral of feelings. So something to be very cognizant of. So to give you some examples of reframing, and this again is changing the words you use to change the way that you think, because we think in words typically. So shift your words to have a positive and focus on solutions versus the problems. Someone always used to tell me, don't even say no problem when someone, because that, even if it's a positive thing, hey, no problem, you're still saying the word problem. The other example they gave is if your kid's walking out of the house and you say, hey, don't slam the door, what do they hear? They hear slam the door. So it's things like that, like maybe would you mind closing the door softly when you leave? That is a totally different, evokes a different energy and emotional response to the things that we're selecting with our vocabulary. So typically we have about 60,000 thoughts a day, and our vocabulary is an ingrained habit. So by selecting different words, it may take time, but you will find this could affect your mood and therefore affect your behavior. So again, problems become challenges. You don't fail at anything. You only have feedback. I always tell my coaching patients that you only fail when you quit, when you stop trying. Thomas Edison example, 1,000 tries to make the light bulb. Well, I'm sitting here with some lights on, and I'm pretty glad he didn't quit. You don't get older, you get wiser. And I always say that studies show actually the happiest age in the human life is 72. So I'm probably guessing we're all under 72. We've got something to look forward to. So you're just going to get wiser and happier. The word diet is kind of tainted, has a negative feeling for most people. Go on a diet, I don't know. Instead, use something like nutrition programs. The word loser, when you do Biggest Losers, that sounds negative. Maybe Biggest Burner. I did a Biggest Burner challenge at my last job, and it was on fat burning. Incinerating fat. I always think I'm incinerating fat when I'm at the gym. Shedding fat. The other word that you may want to consider reusing is the word quit. Instead of the word quit, you're not quitting anything. You're stopping. You're not going to quit eating cookies. You're going to stop eating cookies. And same with smoking. There's a really good book to help with tobacco cessation. It's called The Easy Way to Stop Smoking by Alan Carr, C-A-R-R. You know anyone or currently yourself dealing with tobacco addiction, that is a brilliant book that uses neuro-linguistic programming and reframing to help change your brain. And I've had at least 10 people quit with that book. It's pretty awesome. So if you have questions about that at the end, let me know. But stop smoking. You're not quitting anything. There you go. So that concludes our presentation today. I just want to wrap up with a summary here and give you a few minutes for questions. So remember, hopefully you've had enjoyed the information today and have gained some new insight on how reality is really whatever we perceive to be true. And our interpretation of reality is a very powerful determining factor for the health of our minds and our bodies. And remember, your thoughts are constantly changing the physiology of your body, so be cognizant of those. And your mind and your body are inseparably connected. And through repetition and time, you can change your health and improve it through neuroplasticity and the examples that we gave, attention, awareness, and reframing to improve your mind and your body and your overall quality of life. So do we have any final questions about the material today? Very good. Yes, thank you. stress is definitely a perception for sure. It's hard when you're in it, but once you learn, you'll learn new things. So very good. So I'll make sure that Megan gets a copy of the slides here. One thing that I would encourage you to do, if this topic interests you, there is a lecture by Deepak Chopra on YouTube that is really good. It talks about how the mind and the body are connected and how gut feelings are real, that your body has the ability to intuitively pick up on its environment. So very cool lecture by Deepak Chopra. And then if you're interested on following some positive things on social media, feel free to like Aziel Health pages on social media, Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. And then if you are a reader yourself, I have a list of books on the reference page and websites used to write the material. So thank you so much for having me today. And if you have any questions, I'll stay logged in until 1 o'clock and be viewing the chat box for you. So thank you so much, and take care.